speaker is Professor Dilip Kumar Mohanta. Sir is Professor of Philosophy at University of Calcutta. His area of interest lies in Indian philosophy, Buddhism, Nyaya, Advait, Vedanta. He is also interested in modern philosophy. He has been Fulbright scholar and Nehru visiting lecturer at University of Florida, USA. UGC visiting professor at the Advanced Center of Philosophy at Kurs University, Associate Fellowship at Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla, visiting professor at Verma. There are several achievements of Sir and the list is very long. Sir has been conferred Jan Jacobian Prize in 2016 at Warsaw by the Society for Universal Dialogue. He has authored, co-authored and edited more than 24 books and published 4 research papers. He has delivered lecture in India and abroad both, USA Chamber of Commerce and University of Florida. With this brief introduction, I invite Sir for his deliberation.
Namo Sarvebhyo Namo Namaha. Good afternoon to all. I'm very happy to be here because I offer sincere thanks and acknowledgement to my organizer friends here for 2 reasons. Number one, it's a rare opportunity for me to refresh my old friendships with many of my old friends present here, right from Professor Shukla, Professor Singh, Professor Tandon, and secondly, to extend new friendship coming over here. A little correction, so kindly she has introduced me. I am already retired after 40 years of teaching. I am now a retired teacher of philosophy. Anyway, so the topic is very, relevant. I remember a few years back, Dr. Sanjay Shukla's manuscript went to me for review whether it can be published or not, whether money can be given to him, this author. So I was so impressed by his words and laborious academic words, and I'm happy to see that this manuscript has been published. Side by side, this is what is going on today in philosophy is also important. Whether we are repeating like an orthodox thinker what our forefathers said in India, whether philosophy is dead in India, whether it is living. If it is living as pointed correctly by Professor Singh just now, then how to continue with this living tradition? So long in my active teaching career, we used to write only in English. We did in English, but now I have been trying to see in my mother tongue, Bengali, and sometimes the classics. My first love is Sanskrit, and I find Rashbihari Das, who was a student of K.C. Bhattacharya, a professor of philosophy in Calcutta University, he has written some essays in Bangla after his retirement. After his retirement, he learned many languages, including Persian. He translated Amar Khayyam also. And these are I find very genuine and creative. So what I am going to tell you now, this is mostly based on these Bangla essays, because these are very creative, innovative ideas are there, and this should be extended to people. It has been published, no more available, I think, posthumous essays, and another essay published by Calcutta University in 1996, Philosophical Essays of Rashbihari Das. So I shall be trying to address the problem in a different way, that I named it as what I've given the name of my essay? Forgotten. I think something on doubt, value of doubt, sangshayer mulya. People generally term Sangsayavadi is something very bad. It's not that. There are two types of Sangshaya. He distinguished very clearly. Before this, I must say the seminar is on recent past Indian philosophical thinking, and as in keynote address very rightly pointed out Professor Shukla and also emphasized by Professor Singh, that we have thinkers in philosophy with distinctions right from K.C. Bhattacharya, Kalidas Bhattacharya, etc. to J.N. Mohanty, B.K. Motilal during this time period. In and between the large galaxies of thinkers, Rashbihari Das has a distinctive place as an original thinker. His time frame was 1894 to 1973. He has worked on Kant, Shankara, Nyaya, Whitehead, Ayer, and many issues of philosophy. Today I propose to discuss how does Rashbihari understand the value of skeptical doubt, attitude in matters concerning philosophy and religion. He is a polyglot, an intellectual reformer, a down-to-earth philosopher. And he has been widely acclaimed for his commitment to the rigors of logic, his atheistic and skeptical views, his courage of conviction and open-mindedness. This characterizes his philosophy. I would call Rashbihari because he himself said we should overcome the colonial hangover in those days. Why? He said in our Indian tradition it is not proper to address somebody with surname. We have Kant, we have Whitehead, we have Russell, or Berkeley, all are surnames. But our tradition is with the first name. This is Kalidas, Bhavabhuti, Shankara. That is why I would prefer to refer to him, this famous thinker, as simply by Rashbihari. This is, I learned from him. He said, philosophy, what is philosophy? He said, it is a philosophical question. What is philosophy is a philosophical question, whereas what is mathematics is not a mathematical question. Philosophical questions deal with perennial issues, and for this reason, philosophers in different countries and in different times, and even in the same period of time, raise different types of questions. Philosophy deals with philosophical problems. In a state of self-consciousness, a philosopher can reflect on the nature of his work and explain it not only for himself but also for others. As very correctly referred by chief guest today in the morning, how philosophy is useful in other walks of life. This is what a philosopher does when he philosophizes. This characterizes the philosophical understanding of Rashbihari. There are many philosophical issues where Rashbihari has the original ideas and reflections. He believes that without subjective acceptance, it is quite possible to objectively present one's philosophical position. But for the sake of delimitation, time is short, I will try to develop only one concept, the doubt. You see, then the second issue, as I mentioned in introduction, that how should we deal with our ancient philosophical problems? Although Kalidasa said, Purana mitha vina sadhu sarvam. If something is old, it is not always gold. If something is new, it is not always bad. Sant parikshaha. It is philosopher who examines both. So if it is old, all classics are not bad. let us try to see how we can utilize it in our time. There are also thinkers who express pathological doubt, utkot samshaya, about the ancient philosophy and compared with a graveyard of dead ideas. So philosophy is just something dead. A subject is dead, It deals with only dead ideas and repeating, some orthodox. But in my opinion, we can carry out the spirit of their remarks deeper and end with an optimistic note. Then how it is optimistic? How should we deal with our ancient philosophical ideas? How they become helpful for us? We, the modern researchers in Indian philosophy, can utilize the old ideas for creative and critical research and can turn it into a blossoming, beautiful garden of ideas, flowers of ideas. Today we need to read the classical philosophy of India to revitalize the old ideas for our own time. And one way of doing this is to deviate from the orthodox way of repeating it, but to exercise our freedom of assimilating it with the new context, just like a flowing river. In other words, for understanding India's great argumentative tradition, we are to revitalize it. We may apply Indian methodological devices to the major concepts of Western philosophy. To me, philosophy means philosophical problems. These problems are like with our life and world. In India's argumentative tradition, a reasonable statement is acceptable even if it is said by a child. Yukti siddham vachagrajjam baladapi sukhadapi. This is there in our tradition. And an unreasonable statement is rejectionable even if it is said by an old man. Yukti hinang vachotejjam vriddhadapi sukhadapi. This is permissible from the Vedic tradition itself. How? If we read very closely Rig Veda, we see Anubhadra Krautava Yantu Vishwataha. That noble thoughts come to us from different directions. So Veda is open-ended here. You are open to learning. Open-ended debate and consequent deviation from the past understanding makes a philosophy living, as it happened in case of philosophical thinking of Rashbihari Das. Another important point in the Rig Veda, there is a mantra which actually indicates the teaching. A single question may be addressed from different contextual standpoints. This is there in the Vedas. So what is Vedas is not irrelevant today. All researches, unless there is innovation and open-endedness, you cannot proceed for any research, either in humanities or in science. Many scientists are very fond of reading these Vedic methods. Also, as a student of Nyaya, we see it starts with inquiry. Unless you have doubt, you cannot proceed for an inquiry. So doubt is very important for a philosopher, not only for philosophers, all the researchers. Then how does Rashbihari Das says doubt is valuable in our time? The name of the essay is Sangshayer Mulla, and second essay is Darshaner Swarup, Nature of Philosophy. He says, skepticism works against bias and prejudice. It tends to make them impartial and intolerant of each other's faith. Philosophy, as a critical reflection, is free inquiry, and as it is not based on any dogmatic faith, philosophy is skeptical in attitude, and will always remain so, to some extent skeptical. Skeptical attitude, I consider, is essential for all genuine critical inquiries. Our judgments are never free from obscurity and uncertainty. The law of excluded middle, the three laws of thought, one is very strong, is law of excluded middle. It is an attempt of explain the world in a deterministic way. So it is based on an assumption that judgment about the world is either true or false. But in practical world, it is not so. Practical world is different. So pragmatism is very important for our life, and it is not based on this two-valued logic of either or. There cannot be two exclusive categories, is the demand of a free inquiry. All knowledge claims, therefore, are fallible. And for innovative learning, free inquiry is to be encouraged. A skeptic is always ready to correct mistakes, and he is against any kind of rigid dogmatic belief. For Raspberry, a skeptic has securely motivated us in a bio-negative suspension of judgment and non-assertion as vehicles that ultimately self-destruct en route to silence. Both in his life and his philosophical writings, Raspberry was completely opposed to dogmatism and to flattery. He could not be otherwise. There was a Kant within him. Like Kant, Raspberry has rejected spatial metaphysics, transcendent metaphysics, but Raspberry has established on the path of science an ontology of phenomena in general. This form of general metaphysics, ontology of experience, is not, however, the study of any spatial objects. There are two types of metaphysics specialists and metaphysics generalists. So he does not deny the metaphysics generalists, but metaphysics specialists, because which is based on only assumptions. It is the study of the general nature of all things. At the hands of Aristotle, Leibniz, and others, ontology already involves spatial metaphysics. They expound the general nature of all things, from an ordinary object like a pot, a pen, to the soul and God. So according to Aristotle, all things are but combinations of matter and forms in different proportions, ranging from pure matter without form to the pure form without matter. Raspberry, however, seems to separate ontology from spatial metaphysics. He is a metaphysician who considers the general nature of all things except these three things: the soul, the world as a whole, and God. All things except these three things are called the phenomena only, which are things known and knowable according to Kant. So an ontology of phenomena in general, is possible. It can study the general nature, the general structure of all things, so far as they are known and knowable. This spirit of Kant's philosophy constitutes the inner element of Raspberry's philosophic soul. Raspberry's agnostic approach enables him to remain open-ended in spite of using mild form of skepticism in philosophizing. It is indeed true that the primary concern of skepticism is cognitive. Raspberry understands skepticism in a specific sense because it does not deny the possibility of knowledge altogether. Raspberry, a skeptic, is a seeker of truth, and the chief concern of such thinker is to go on questioning or raising doubt about our cognitive claims on the basis of belief. A philosopher, as a truth seeker, cannot initiate her inquiry unless he has an attitude of doubt about what he intends to inquire. Certain attitude of doubt is an indispensable requirement for critical reflection, which Raspberry calls philosophy. Raspberry takes the term skepticism in a mild sense to mean the attitude of doubt, and this attitude is valuable in philosophy as well as in religion. Such a form of doubt does not have an intrinsic value but has instrumental value in our life and thought. Since our knowledge is hedged in by several beliefs and assumptions, our knowledge claim cannot be absolute. Our judgments are not totally free from obscurity and uncertainty. Had they been so, the question could not be raised. Is judgment true? We always ask, is judgment true? It implies that its truth is not guaranteed. A dose of uncertainty always remains in our objective judgment. No knowledge claim can be accepted as absolutely indubitable. To put it otherwise, our process of knowing is a continuous judging of the claims of our beliefs in the light of evidences, praman sapeksha, and the philosophy as critical reflection centered on self-inquiry and inquiry into goodness, initiated from the skeptical attitude. In this respect, philosophical knowledge is different from scientific knowledge. The role of knower is irrelevant in case of scientific knowledge. Scientists' subjective role is not important in case of science. The problem of science are object-centric, whereas philosophic problems are centered on the self. Unless one knows the meaning of good and bad, one seems to be unable to live a good life, to make any conscious, worthwhile effort to address the question centered on the self as who am I? An unexamined life is not worth living, said Socrates. Another philosopher of the East, Siddhartha Gautama, to his first disciple, he said, examine like a goldsmith and then either accept if you find it is grounded on sound reason or based on facts, or reject it if it is otherwise, even if it is said by me. Pariksha madvacha grajjam vikshave natu gauravad. Don't accept what I say on sheer reverence to me, said Buddha. Be rational, be moral, and be happy. This is the message of Buddha to the world. Raspberry is quite aware of both these traditions, Socratic traditions and the Buddhist traditions, Indian traditions, and knows how to assimilate one with the other. At this point, Raspberry's conception of philosophy seems to be wider in scope than that of his mentor, Krishna Chandra Bhattacharya. Krishna Chandra Bhattacharya considers philosophic enterprise a self-evident elaboration of the self-evident, right? And classifies philosophical activity into three broad heads, such as philosophy of object, philosophy of spirit, and philosophy of truth. Krishna Chandra's classification of philosophical thinking does not seem to accommodate philosophy of science. But Raspberry's conception of philosophy simply as critical reflection or in the form of persistent seeking truth initiated from skeptical attitude provides room for philosophy of science. So he differs from his mentor Krishna Chandra Bhattacharya. His conception of philosophy can accommodate philosophy of science, where Krishna Chandra's conception of philosophy cannot accommodate philosophy of science. Where does exist the importance of such a wider conception of philosophy? The importance of this conception of philosophy, initiated by a mild form of skeptical attitude that lies not only in its width of spectrum, but also for the recognition of dynamism in our act of knowing. It is an open recognition that ignorance is more extensive in scope than that of knowledge. The value of this kind of attitude of doubt is that it initiates free inquiry and inspires us to arrive at knowledge, overcoming doubt. The free inquiry enables us to get evidences evidences in support of against our belief. Okay. The skeptical attitude is important because it helps us to correct our mistakes associated with the objective judgment. And it works against bias and prejudices. It makes the ground for rigid and dogmatic belief. Again, it tends to enable us to remain impartial and tolerant of thought and faith of others. So Raspberry's conception of philosophy has also the merit of refusing the blind acceptance of the directions of belief. On the positive side, it helps us to unveil the grades and locations of falsity and vagueness in our knowledge claim. The message of such a conception of philosophy is that there cannot be any last word in the context of knowing. In this sense, this conception of philosophy is nearer to what is known as the science of wisdom. A critical philosopher is also a wise person in the true sense of the term. Anyway, since time is short, I cannot complete my paper. I have sent the soft copy to the organizer. You can have it if you want to read it. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you, sir.